Most governing boards schedule an extended meeting time at least once a year to accomplish what can't be accomplished during regular board meetings. We call these board retreats, and they are precious time for the board. So how can we design this time to be most productive? Hi, I'm Jack Peterson with Managing for Mission. Managing for Mission specializes in governance consulting and administrative consulting for faith-based schools. We call these special times together retreats, although they aren't retreats in the traditional sense of taking time away from our routine to center ourselves more on God. During the course of the year, trustees find themselves making many decisions, but they long to step back and see how all these decisions fit into an overall direction for the school. They realize they need to set aside time to do this. Their motivation is often just to do planning for the future, but there are three other important reasons for setting this time aside: strengthening board process, prayer and board formation, and strengthening board relationships. With proper design and coordination with the regular meetings, they can all be accomplished. Let's look at each of these four objectives. Board planning can range from setting annual goals for the board itself to setting a strategic vision for the school for the next 5 to 10 years. If the former, the board can generally use a meeting or two to identify potential goals and use the retreat for deeper discussion and adoption. If the need is for institutional strategic planning, satisfying it might require three major steps. The first might be a retreat at the end of one year to initialize the process. Then most of the next school year may be needed for a steering committee and a number of subcommittees to engage the community in helping to develop the plan. Finally, at the end of that year, the board may need a retreat to thoroughly review and approve the proposed plan. Whatever the level of planning, it's important to design the retreat to provide necessary information and incorporate sufficient discussion, yet stay within the time available to bring closure to at least one step of the process. There are many best practices for making boards more effective, and no board has mastered them all. Are board agendas designed to allow for substantive discussion? Is there a board policy manual that keeps a record of the board's decisions over the years? And is there a robust process for selecting and orienting new board members? The board retreat is a good time to review these practices. A helpful tool for doing this is reviewing the board's annual self-evaluation, which is itself a best practice. By doing this at the retreat, the board can delve more deeply into its own needs and set goals for the coming year to up its own game. In faith-based schools, it's important that trustees individually and as a group embody the spirituality and ethos of the school. As lay people working in the secular world, they bring some of this with them. But given the responsibility they now have to guide a ministry, it's critical that they continue to be fed spiritually. Now, to some extent, this can happen during the regular board meetings. But an opening prayer and a closing prayer, as important as they are, simply won't fill the bill. Even a personal commitment to spiritual growth doesn't necessarily translate into a collective commitment. The retreat is an opportune time for the board to renew its commitment to the school's religious foundations and explore how to incorporate them into its work. Studying the school's values and spiritual foundation is important, but formation must also include an experiential element. Here we come closer to the traditional understanding of a retreat as a time away to renew our relationship with God. While this was the original purpose of a retreat, it often gets lost in the press of handling weighty business matters. Boards would do well, even in their regular meetings, to set aside time for silent prayer, for communal prayer, and for reflecting on Scripture and other foundational documents. But these will be more effective if during the retreat time the board can go deeper, learn and practice forms of prayer that enrich their reflection, and experience those graces that take time to develop. We don't often think of boards as teams. We think of them as people with various connections to the school who assemble to make decisions on behalf of the people it serves. They want to make those decisions carefully, but also efficiently. Working on how they relate to each other as human beings seems like a luxury and not central to the work that they do. And yet, we all know the difference between a functional and a dysfunctional board. A dysfunctional board struggles to decide anything because members are distracted by the perceived agendas of others and are constantly in defensive mode. A functional board, on the other hand, is one where mutual respect and appreciation allow members to focus on the issues at hand and actually draw strength from diverse perspectives and skills. I call this traveling at the speed of trust. While boards often feel there isn't enough time for team building activities, my experience is that they give back more time than they take. The board retreat is a great time for people to interact on a more human, relational level. It helps if people can engage in activities that allow them to be more vulnerable and put everyone on an equal footing. An overnight retreat is a great way to build relationships, as is simply sharing meals together. I've also used everything from sing-alongs and drum circles to chowder cook-offs and frisbee golf to break down the barriers. Invariably, these additions to the agenda meet with suspicion and some anxiety, but they are often what people say later made the most difference in how they approach their work. The question is, how do we squeeze planning, process, formation, and relationship building into a half-day or even a full-day retreat? You may have noticed as you listen to the descriptions of each of these that they're not independent of each other. Planning requires good board process. Prayer is a great way to build relationships. Formation can strengthen the planning process, and working on board process can be part of team building. There are ways of blending these elements together. One board may need to emphasize some elements over others, and in some cases, deeper development of an element may take place beyond the retreat day. For instance, the board retreat may introduce a prayer program that trustees commit to, which is then revisited briefly during board meetings throughout the year. The key is to be thoughtful, the way our schools are in designing their curriculum. You see, schools look at the big picture of what they want their students to become and then develop a curriculum that supports that. Shouldn't we as school boards and school commissions use the same thoughtful approach in designing our board retreat and meeting time? I hope these few minutes have provided you with some principles for designing your board or commission retreat. If you want more information, please follow the link above to our website at managingformission.com, where you can get more information to help you in your role with the school. Or you can contact me and ask me your questions directly. The work you do is important enough to set aside some special time to do it better, and you won't regret that investment of time. God bless.